Welcome to everyone here with us today. Great, and thank you so much for your contributions and the submissions as well. I might just go through just a couple of questions, if that's okay, and I suppose I might direct them to perhaps each of the groups, and if you're able to come back in. So I suppose in terms of the HEA and Mr. Conlon, as you've mentioned, we're seeing a huge numbers increase in terms of students at third level. That's caused a huge demand on our services at third level, and particularly it has increased, hopefully, access as well. But in terms of this funding, you mentioned lifelong learning in your submission as well. I mean, we are below the EU average when it comes to lifelong learning. And I know that that's not just the HEA and so many players within this space, but how could this future model of funding, increased funding, support lifelong learning? And I suppose, how does the HEA foresee that they could work with HEIs to improve that? And then I suppose also, if you can tell me how many students have come through Path Access and the Deprivation Index scores. I was very interested to hear about those two programmes. So perhaps is that recent funding? Do we have any sort of stats in terms of students that have come through that? Just in relation to Solace and Mr. Brownlee, we've met a number of times, and fantastic to hear about the numbers of people, coming through to the CAO website. It's absolutely phenomenal that we're seeing that there's been that addition to the CAO form, and I speak about it every chance I get to all the students that I talk to about how it's not solely just the traditional routes into college, but now when you're looking at your form, you now see the choice for further and higher education. And even during the week, during the weekend, I was speaking to a young student who's looking at pre-nursing maybe, instead of maybe going straight into nursing, and there's choices with that. So I suppose it drives choice, but I suppose, how do we encourage employers? And you have spoken a little bit, I know, earlier on this too. I'm talking now particularly around micro-enterprise and sole traders. How do we engage with that particular group? I'm not talking about maybe the large ESB, for example, or Electric Ireland, where I know you've mentioned as well, Ms. Strant, about the huge interest in electrical side of things. How do we engage with the micro-enterprises, particularly in a region where I'm from, Roscommon and East Galway, where maybe you're dealing with a lot more supply companies and things like this? And plus, they don't have time. They're up the walls. How do we make it easier for them? I suppose just on the NTPF and the National Training Fund, NTF, how do we make better use of that? I suppose it has come up about the funds that are there. How do we make better use of that? Or do you have any suggestions on that? Ms. Trant, very nice to meet you, and very informative. I know your contributions as well. Just in relation to the 62 training programmes that we have at the moment, I know over the last year I've had in my mind that there are 18 more coming on stream, and you've mentioned that there's 70 planned for the end of this year. Could you give me a timeline for the remainder? There were some very interesting ones in there. I know, like around farm management, equestrian, particularly of interest for me, I suppose, with Mount Bellew College of Agricultural College, and linking in with the TUs. And something that would really be of interest maybe to farmers, and particularly you could really see about how farm relief schemes and things like that, helping older farmers, bringing in some of these students coming through an apprenticeship through that programme, could work with some of our older farmers, particularly around supporting maybe a number of farmers in a particular region. I'd be very interested in that. Also, you've mentioned 8,300 employers, fantastic altogether. But again, similar question, and I don't know if you've anything to add maybe with Mr. Brownlee, but I suppose my question, maybe more so, sorry for yourself, might be around the 10,000 apprenticeships registration per year. I think, are we roughly around 8,000 at the moment, or whatever? I know it's ramped up this year and last year, but can I just ask you, that 10,000 you're planning, and only maybe that I don't understand it as well, but how is that broken down, say, between employers that will have to take on apprentices, colleges that bring people in, and placements? So perhaps just how that 10,000 is broken down between those different areas. And I suppose just my apologies, and I probably don't have very much on the QQI, but if you have anything you would like to add to any of those points, very welcome. Gurmila Maga. Thank you, Chair. If I might start with Mr. Conlon, then Mr. Brownlee and Ms. Trant.
Thanks, Senator. In respect of progress to date in access groups, I'll try and be brief. So in 2019-20, there were 5 students from disadvantaged areas to every 10 students from more affluent areas. And these are perhaps maybe the challenges first, and then I might just talk about progress. 10% of the student population came from disadvantaged areas, compared to 19% from more affluent areas. Only 51 students in the country come from extremely disadvantaged backgrounds. And on high points courses such as medicine, 5% of new entrants come from disadvantaged areas. So we can see that from using the DEIS data to see where students are
So
coming
the
from.
DIS then is about you evaluating, sorry, apologies now for interrupting, but it's about evaluating the students that are currently on courses, is it?
Absolutely.
It's not about evaluating students that are applying to the CAO, and that colleges use that data to maybe allocate places depending on the DIS data that comes in? No.
Not as of yet, Senator, because the data is very new. We're only collecting for about the last 3 years, but now we can look at the data and we can use evidence to inform policy. So we can now see that the makeup of the makeup of a student cohort in a particular programme, where they're coming from, and we can now say to institutions, well, what are you doing to change that balance or to address that?
So does HEA have the powers, I suppose, to work with HEIs on particular courses where you say, like in medicine, that it's so low, where you can say, look, we want to look at ones from disadvantaged areas using this DIS score, and that has to be taken into account with maybe a cohort of places that they're allocating? Is that something that we can look at?
It's something we can encourage through policy
and incentivise
in terms of
and see change.
Driving an agenda. I mean, institutions are autonomous in respect of academic matters, just as student entries and programme content and so on. So we don't want to interfere with that autonomy. But we can hold institutions to account through. We have a very detailed process called strategic dialogue, where we meet institutions on an annual basis and talk about their performance with reference to key performance indicators themselves. Yeah. So we can use that process to say, what are you doing to improve the numbers of students from varied backgrounds on medical programmes, for example?
Well, I'd really love to use that, because you use that as an example yourself, so that would be one I would be coming back to you perhaps to use it as an example about how we see change there through our third levels, and particularly our traditional HEIs. If I might move on to Mr. Brownlee, please. Thank you. I'm just conscious of the time.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Senator. I mean, just on that point around engaging with micro-enterprises, I think that's an area where ETBs are really, really well placed, because, as we said at the start, they're involved in every community in Ireland. They know the local employers, they know the local businesses. We've implemented a scheme called Skills to Advance, and it basically offers free or very close to free kind of upskill and training for employees in those exact type of enterprises. So you've seen a green skills initiative for the hospitality industry, 50 Shades Greener. You've seen retrofitting rolled out of Mount Lucas and Waterford and Wexford. You've seen work on remote working and leadership, management and supervision, digital skills. So those types of skills that every micro-enterprise is going to need to kind of take the next step and evolve.
So that they can do those skills to advance courses, but those people themselves in those companies can't take on apprentices, or more challenging maybe to take on apprentices or offer placements to bring in somebody brand new and skill them up to maybe be available.
And that's a big priority in the action plan. So, Mary Liz, I don't know if you want to talk about the apprenticeship.
Yeah, well, I suppose one really practical thing that's happened just this year, Senator, is the introduction of the €2,000 grant, you know, on the 37 new apprenticeships.
About that too.
Yeah, and so that's going to be a big help, you know, so each year for each apprentice. So that's a financial contribution to small employers, which is one thing. Yeah.
Could I just ask you, only sorry because time, my apologies for interrupting, but just when it comes to that, can we say that a year ago, can we see the difference? Like the 2,000 grant has been there now for 2 years, and the 1,000 that comes in after 6 months. Have we seen a difference with micro employers coming in on that? Because my whole issue is that they're coming into a company where the micro employer doesn't have the time to skill that person up, and then they can't afford them to be gone for the 2 days in the training. So, and I know we're looking at measures and ways to manage that, but have we seen a difference in the last 2 years with this incentive? Because I don't know if that incentive alone is enough.
Yeah, so the number of employers has gone up. I don't have the detail. The overall number has gone up, Senator. I don't have the detail on the breakdown of those, whether they're micro or small or large, but that's certainly something we can come back to you on.
And just, sorry, I know I'm probably out of time, but might come back to me maybe again on the 10,000 registrations, just a breakdown of what that is between the different areas. And sorry, Chair, I know you might be under pressure with time, so I don't know if you have time to respond. Or...
Brief response.
Yeah, so the 10,000 registrations that's targeted for 2025, that's actually apprentices being employed by an employer and then going in and, you know, completing their training. So you know, so basically each of the, all of them. So they get they're employed. Then they have there's an arrangement for them to get their training, you know, and so basically that's,
And sorry for interrupting, but is that through colleges? So they go to the college or they do the FEC course and the college has a placement set up with the employer? Or is it the employer themselves that will arrange it directly?
The employer gives them a contract of employment. That's how, and registers them as an apprentice. That's the way it starts.
And then they link in with the university. Sorry, I just wasn't clear with their other options for it, so thank you very much.